On September 23, 1780, three armed militiamen stopped a lone traveler on the road near Tarrytown, New York. The man wore civilian clothes. He carried a pass signed by one of the most respected generals in the Continental Army. He claimed his name was John Anderson, and at first, there was nothing about him that seemed important enough to alter the course of the American Revolution. Then the militiamen searched him. Hidden inside his boots were papers describing the defenses of West Point, the strength of its garrison, the location of its artillery, and the weaknesses of the position. The traveler was not John Anderson. He was Major John Andre, the chief intelligence officer of the British Army in North America. And the man who had signed his pass was Benedict Arnold. Within hours, Washington's most important fortress, the Northern Army, and perhaps the entire revolutionary cause were in danger. The plot was not the work of an obscure traitor. Benedict Arnold had once been one of Washington's most valuable officers. He had fought with reckless courage. He had suffered terrible wounds. He had helped delay a British invasion at Lake Champlain and played a decisive role at Saratoga. Soldiers had followed him into fire because he appeared to possess the one quality an army cannot manufacture: absolute belief in victory. Now that same man was preparing to hand the British the key to the Hudson River. How did one of America's greatest battlefield heroes become the defector who nearly shattered Washington's army? To understand the betrayal, it is necessary to understand what Arnold had been before Americans learned to use his name as a synonym for treason. He was not born into wealth or high rank. He grew up in Connecticut and entered business as a young man. He was ambitious, energetic, proud, and deeply sensitive to insult. Those qualities could create an exceptional commander in battle. They could also create a dangerous enemy when recognition failed to match expectation. When the revolution began, Arnold moved quickly. He joined the attack on Fort Ticonderoga in 1775, where American forces captured cannon that would later help drive the British from Boston. He then led an extraordinary expedition through the wilderness of Maine toward Quebec. The march was brutal. Food disappeared. Men suffered from cold, exhaustion, sickness, and hunger. The attack on Quebec failed, and Arnold was wounded, but the campaign established his reputation as a commander willing to risk almost anything. In 1776, he helped construct a small fleet on Lake Champlain. The vessels were crude compared with the power Britain could eventually deploy, but Arnold understood the strategic purpose. He did not have to destroy the British fleet. He had to delay it. At the Battle of Valcour Island, his force was defeated, yet the resistance consumed time. The British advance south stalled as the campaigning season ended. That delay helped prevent an immediate invasion from Canada and gave the Americans another year to prepare. Arnold had turned tactical defeat into strategic survival. Then came Saratoga. In 1777, a British army under General John Burgoyne moved south from Canada. The campaign was designed to seize the Hudson Corridor and separate New England from the rest of the rebellion. Arnold clashed with his superior, Horatio Gates, but when the fighting reached its decisive stage, he entered the action with extraordinary aggression. At Bemis Heights, he rode into the battle, rallied troops, attacked British positions, and helped turn the engagement into a major American victory. A bullet struck the same leg that had already been wounded at Quebec. Arnold's horse fell. The general was trapped beneath it, his leg shattered again. He had helped secure one of the most important victories of the war, but he left the battlefield physically damaged and politically embittered. Saratoga convinced France that the United States might survive. The victory helped produce the French alliance. It changed the war. Arnold believed he had not received the credit he deserved. That belief was not entirely imaginary. Congress promoted other officers ahead of him. Political rivalries damaged his standing. Accusations surrounded his handling of money and property. He often spent beyond his means. He felt that men with less courage, less skill, and fewer sacrifices were receiving rewards that should have been his. Washington respected Arnold's military ability and tried to support him. But even Washington could not control Congress, state authorities, military jealousies, or Arnold's growing anger. This is where the character of the man becomes central. Arnold did not merely want to serve. He wanted his service to be seen. He did not merely want victory. He wanted status, gratitude, authority, and financial security. Every wound became evidence of what America owed him. Every criticism became proof that America had betrayed him first. Resentment can be more dangerous than simple greed because it allows greed to disguise itself as justice. By 1778, Arnold was appointed military commander of Philadelphia after the British evacuated the city. The position offered prestige, but it also placed him inside a world of wealth, social competition, political suspicion, and personal temptation. Arnold lived extravagantly. His expenses increased. His enemies watched him. He entered business arrangements that created further accusations and controversy. In 1779, he married Peggy Shippen, a young woman from a prominent Philadelphia family with loyalist connections. During the British occupation, Peggy had known Major John Andre, a polished officer, artist, and intelligence specialist who moved easily through elite social circles. She would become an important link in the communications that followed. No single event transformed Arnold overnight. Betrayal developed through accumulation. He had real grievances. He also had real debts. He possessed immense pride. He felt abandoned by the country he had helped defend, and he began to imagine that changing sides was not treason, but compensation. By May 1779, Arnold was secretly communicating with the British. The correspondence used coded language, intermediaries, and false identities. He offered information. He explored the price of defection. He wanted money and rank. The British wanted something more valuable than another angry American officer. They wanted a position capable of changing the war. That position was West Point. West Point was not simply a fort. It was a system of defenses controlling one of the most strategically important bends in the Hudson River. The river connected New York City with the interior and the route toward Canada. If Britain controlled the Hudson Corridor, it could threaten the fragile connection between New England and the Middle States. Washington understood the danger from the beginning of the war. American engineers and soldiers built fortifications on both sides of the river. Batteries covered the water. Redoubts protected the heights. A massive iron chain stretched across the Hudson to obstruct British ships and hold them beneath American guns. The main fortification was called Fort Arnold before the betrayal. It was later renamed Fort Clinton because the Americans refused to leave the traitor's name attached to the position. Fort Arnold could hold roughly 700 men, while other troops were distributed among the wider defensive network. The exact strength varied, but the purpose never changed. West Point protected communication, supply, and movement across the Northern Theater. Washington later described it as the most important post in America. Arnold knew why. He knew the terrain, he knew the defenses, he knew the procedures, he knew Washington trusted him. And he knew that surrendering West Point would offer Britain something far more significant than his personal defection. If the British captured the fortress intact, they could move warships farther along the Hudson, threaten American supply lines, isolate New England, disrupt coordination between armies, and place pressure on the newly arrived French forces. Washington might be forced to abandon positions, divide his army, or fight to recover a fortress designed to resist exactly that kind of attack. The plan did not guarantee the destruction of the Continental Army. No counterfactual can be proven with certainty. But it threatened to break the strategic structure holding Washington's war together. Arnold needed command of West Point. Washington did not initially want to place him there. Arnold's damaged leg limited his ability to serve in an active field command, and Washington considered other positions. But Arnold repeatedly sought the Hudson appointment. In the summer of 1780, he finally received it. The American commander had placed the key inside the hands of the man preparing to sell it. If you value military history that follows the decisions, intelligence failures, and personal rivalries behind the battlefield, subscribe now, because the most dangerous attacks are often launched by someone already inside the defenses. Arnold moved carefully. He did not simply open the gates and invite the British in. That would have exposed him too early. Instead, he began weakening the position in ways that could be presented as ordinary command decisions. Troops were dispersed, defenses were neglected, supplies and equipment were arranged poorly. Important points were left vulnerable. He provided the British with information about the garrison, fortifications, artillery, and likely American responses. The betrayal was being built as an administrative process. That made it harder to detect. A commander can destroy a position without firing a shot if he controls where the troops stand, which orders are delayed, which warnings are ignored, and which weaknesses remain unrepaired. Arnold negotiated with Major John Andre, who served as adjutant general to Sir Henry Clinton and directed British intelligence operations. Andre was intelligent, charming, disciplined, and experienced in the hidden war of agents, coded messages, secret meetings, and divided loyalties. The two men needed to settle the terms. Arnold wanted £20,000 if he successfully delivered West Point, along with a commission in the British Army. The sum was enormous. It reflected not only the value Arnold placed on himself, but the value Britain placed on the fortress. The British were willing to pay for results. To finalize the plan, Andre had to meet Arnold in person. The operation began with a British warship, HMS Vulture, moving up the Hudson. Andre traveled aboard the vessel and came ashore under cover of darkness. Around September 21, 1780, he met Arnold near Haverstraw on the western side of the river. The meeting lasted longer than expected. Night passed. Plans, maps, troop estimates, artillery information, and details of the defenses changed hands. Arnold gave Andre documents that could guide a British assault and explain how the fortress might be taken before the Americans understood what was happening. The original plan was for Andre to return to the Vulture. Then the operation began to collapse. American forces fired on the British ship from shore. The Vulture moved downriver, leaving Andre stranded behind American lines. He could not safely return by the route he had used. Arnold gave him a pass under the false name John Anderson. The document described him as traveling on legitimate business and carried Arnold's signature. That signature should have protected him from ordinary American patrols. But Andre faced another problem. He had entered the lines in uniform. To travel overland, he changed into civilian clothes. That decision transformed his legal position. A uniformed officer captured during a military operation could claim the rights of a prisoner of war. A man traveling in disguise with secret military documents could be treated as a spy. Andre began the journey south toward British-controlled New York City. Every mile increased the danger. The papers were hidden inside his stockings and boots. They included descriptions of fortifications, artillery orders, estimates of troops, and other information linked directly to West Point. He carried enough evidence to expose the entire conspiracy, yet he was also protected by one of the most powerful documents an American traveler could possess, a pass signed by General Benedict Arnold. For a time, it worked. Andre passed through checkpoints. He appeared calm. He had money. He had the habits and speech of a British officer, but he also possessed the confidence of a man who believed the most difficult stage of the mission was behind him. Near Tarrytown on September 23rd, 3 armed men stopped him: John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams. They were not senior intelligence officers. They were local militiamen operating in a region filled with raiders, thieves, loyalists, irregular fighters, and men who changed allegiance according to opportunity. The encounter could have ended in several ways. Andre initially believed the men might be associated with the British. He revealed too much. When he realized his mistake, he presented Arnold's pass and tried to recover control of the situation. The militiamen searched him. They found nothing in his coat, nothing obvious in his baggage. Then they examined his boots. The papers appeared. At that instant, the entire plot changed direction. If Paulding, Van Wart, and Williams had accepted a bribe, released Andre, or failed to conduct a thorough search, the documents could have reached Sir Henry Clinton. The British could have prepared an operation using Arnold's information. West Point might have been attacked while its commander deliberately sabotaged the defense. Instead, Andre became a prisoner. But the danger was not over. The men delivered him to American authorities. The first officers who examined the situation did not immediately understand the scale of the conspiracy. Andre carried a pass from Arnold. Arnold was a major general. He commanded West Point. The simplest assumption was that the traveler might be engaged in legitimate business that could not be explained to junior officers. A message was sent toward Arnold. This nearly saved the conspiracy. Had Andre been returned directly to West Point, Arnold could have released him, destroyed the papers, silenced witnesses, or created a story that concealed the betrayal. Benjamin Tallmadge prevented that outcome. Tallmadge was an American cavalry officer, an intelligence specialist, associated with Washington's secret operations. He examined the circumstances and recognized the pattern. A civilian disguise, military papers, a false name, a journey toward British lines, a pass signed by the commander whose post the documents described. Tallmadge understood that André was not an ordinary traveler. He ordered tighter security and ensured the evidence moved toward Washington rather than back into Arnold's control. Now the conspiracy became a race. Washington was returning from a meeting with French officers. He expected to inspect West Point. Arnold expected Washington to arrive, but he did not yet know how much had been discovered. On the morning of September 25th, Arnold was at breakfast in his headquarters at the Robinson House, across the river from West Point. His wife Peggy was present. Staff and guests prepared for Washington's arrival. Then a messenger brought news. André had been captured. Arnold understood immediately. The papers would reveal everything. Washington was approaching. There was no time to destroy the evidence because the evidence was no longer in his hands. There was no time to invent a convincing explanation. There was only escape. Arnold excused himself from the table. He moved quickly, spoke briefly to Peggy, mounted a horse, and rode toward the river. He reached a boat and ordered the crew to row downstream toward the Vulture. The rowers did not initially know they were helping a traitor escape. Arnold used his authority until he was close enough to the British vessel to place himself beyond American reach. Once aboard, he was safe. Washington arrived expecting to meet one of his generals. Instead, he found disorder and confusion. The defenses of West Point were not prepared for inspection. Arnold was absent. Messages arrived. The documents taken from André were placed before the commander-in-chief. The truth emerged piece by piece. Arnold had asked for West Point. Arnold had weakened West Point. Arnold had communicated with the enemy. Arnold had provided the enemy with its plans. Arnold had signed André's pass. Arnold had fled to a British ship. Washington had trusted a man who intended to deliver the most important post in America. His reaction was controlled, but the shock was profound. Washington had endured defeats, desertions, political attacks, shortages, mutinies, and years of war. This betrayal was different. It came from a general whose courage he had defended and whose abilities he respected. Washington called it treason of the blackest dye. The phrase captured more than anger. Arnold's betrayal threatened confidence inside the officer corps. If one of the Revolution's most celebrated generals could defect, who else might be compromised? If the commander of West Point could secretly weaken his own fortress, which orders could be trusted? Which officers were loyal? Which messengers were genuine? Which plans had already reached the British? Washington acted quickly. Security at West Point was strengthened. Commands were reviewed. Troops were alerted. Officers were sent to find Arnold, although he had already escaped. The defenses he had neglected were examined and reinforced. The fortress remained American. The Hudson remained blocked. The northern states remained connected. The French alliance was not exposed to the strategic disaster Arnold had prepared. The difference between catastrophe and survival had been a roadside search conducted by 3 militiamen and the suspicion of an intelligence officer who refused to accept the obvious explanation. André now faced judgment. He did not behave like a common criminal. American officers who met him often described a composed, intelligent, and honorable man trapped by the methods of espionage. He admitted his identity. The documents spoke for themselves. He had traveled under a false name, in civilian clothes, behind American lines, carrying military intelligence. A board of American officers met on September 29th. The legal question was not whether André was personally courageous or socially admired. The question was whether he had acted as a spy. The answer was yes. André asked to be executed by firing squad, the death normally granted to a soldier. Washington refused. On October 2nd, 1780, André was hanged. His death created a strange emotional contrast. Many Americans despised Arnold, but respected André. The British mourned André as a brave officer. Arnold survived, but his name became permanently associated with betrayal. The British had not received West Point, so they did not pay him the full £20,000 he had sought. He received a smaller payment, reported as £6,000, and a commission as a brigadier general in the British Army. He had changed uniforms, but he had not gained the admiration he expected. To the Americans, he was the ultimate traitor. To many British officers, he was useful but untrustworthy. A man who betrays one side can serve another, but he cannot force either side to respect him. Arnold later led British operations against American targets, including attacks in Virginia and Connecticut. He could still command troops. He could still understand terrain. He could still fight aggressively. But every success carried the shadow of West Point. The tragedy of Benedict Arnold is not that he lacked courage. It is that courage existed beside vanity, resentment, financial desperation, and a need for recognition so powerful that he eventually sold the cause for which he had bled. That combination made him more dangerous than an ordinary spy. An ordinary spy approaches from outside. Arnold was already inside Washington's confidence. He possessed rank. He possessed knowledge. He possessed authority. He could weaken defenses while appearing to administer them. He could sign passes that opened roads. He could move troops without immediately attracting suspicion. He could explain missing supplies, delayed repairs, and dispersed units as military judgment. The entire conspiracy depended on institutional trust. That is why it came so close to succeeding. The British did not need to defeat West Point in a conventional siege if the American commander had already prepared its surrender. They did not need to discover every battery if Arnold supplied the locations. They did not need to guess the strength of the defenders if Arnold provided estimates. They did not need to force the Hudson if the officer controlling the chain and the guns intended to cooperate. Arnold was not merely selling information, he was selling access. The strategic consequences could have been enormous. British possession of West Point would have threatened movement along the Hudson and complicated communication between New England and the rest of the states. Washington might have been forced into an immediate response under conditions chosen by the British. French forces and supplies could have been placed under greater pressure. American morale, already weakened by years of hardship, could have suffered a devastating blow. The capture would also have created a political weapon. Britain could announce that one of Washington's most famous generals had abandoned the rebellion and delivered its strongest fortress. Loyalists could present the defection as proof that the revolutionary leadership was collapsing. Neutral observers might question whether the United States could survive. European governments might reconsider the value of supporting a cause whose senior officers were changing sides. Military positions are never only ground, they are symbols of control. West Point represented the ability of the Americans to deny Britain the Hudson. Its betrayal would have damaged both the map and the mind. Yet the plot failed because secrecy is vulnerable to small disruptions. The Vulture moved downriver after coming under fire. That forced Andre onto the road. Civilian clothing made him a spy. A chance encounter stopped him. A thorough search exposed the papers. Talmadge recognized the threat. A warning reached Arnold early enough for him to escape, but too late for him to save the plan. No grand battle decided the outcome. No army charged across an open field. The most important action occurred inside boots, letters, passes, roads, boats, and decisions made by men who did not yet know the full importance of what they were seeing. This is how intelligence failures and intelligence successes often work. The people at the center rarely see the entire system. Paulding, Van Wart, and Williams did not begin the morning knowing they would stop a conspiracy against West Point. They saw a suspicious traveler and refused to let status, money, or a signed pass end the search. Talmadge did not personally capture Andre. His achievement was interpretation. He connected facts that others might have treated separately. Washington did not prevent Arnold from obtaining command. That was the failure. But once the conspiracy appeared, he acted fast enough to preserve the fortress. The episode also revealed the danger of placing strategic power inside a single personality without constantly testing the systems around that person. Washington trusted Arnold because Arnold had earned battlefield respect. But battlefield courage does not guarantee political loyalty. Past sacrifice does not eliminate future betrayal. A wound suffered for a cause can become, in the mind of a resentful man, an invoice the cause must pay. Arnold believed America owed him. When he decided the debt would never be paid, he sold his knowledge to Britain. The irony is severe. At Lake Champlain, Arnold had helped delay the British advance and preserve time for the Revolution. At Saratoga, he had helped stop the campaign designed to divide New England from the other states. At West Point, He tried to give Britain the strategic division it had failed to achieve through open war. The hero and the traitor were not two different men. They were the same man, driven by the same intensity, pride, ambition, and refusal to accept limits. In battle, those qualities made Arnold formidable. In resentment, they made him catastrophic. Washington's army survived because the conspiracy was discovered before the British operation could begin. West Point remained secure for the rest of the war. The Hudson Corridor did not fall. The American and French coalition continued to build toward the campaign that would trap Cornwallis at Yorktown the following year. Arnold had nearly reversed the momentum of the revolution. Instead, he became a warning. His story demonstrates that armies can be threatened by more than superior firepower. They can be threatened by wounded pride, financial weakness, political rivalry, poor oversight, divided command, and the assumption that yesterday's hero must remain tomorrow's loyal servant. The defenses at West Point were made of stone, timber, artillery, redoubts, and iron chain. But the most important defense was human judgment. 3 militiamen chose to search. Talmadge chose to question. Washington chose to reinforce. Those choices defeated a plan worth £20,000 and protected a position designed for roughly 700 men at its central fortification, along with the broader system controlling the Hudson. Arnold escaped punishment, but he failed to deliver what he had promised. André died, but his capture preserved the fortress. Washington lost a general, but he did not lose the river. That was the real balance of the event. The conspiracy did not end with an explosion. It ended with papers unfolded on a table and a commander realizing that the enemy had been sitting inside his own headquarters. For Washington, the lesson was brutal. Trust was necessary, but trust without verification could destroy an army. For Britain, the lesson was equally clear. A brilliant intelligence plan can collapse when extraction fails and one courier is searched. For Arnold, the lesson came too late. He had expected money, rank, and vindication. He gained money and rank, but vindication never arrived. His military achievements remained real, yet they were swallowed by the betrayal that followed. History remembered the moment when he chose to sell West Point. Not the march through Maine, not the fleet at Lake Champlain, not the charge at Saratoga. One decision redefined every victory that came before it. That may be the darkest part of his story. Benedict Arnold almost destroyed Washington's northern strategy, not because he was always a coward, but because he had once been a hero. His reputation gave him access. His wounds gave him credibility. His rank gave him authority. Washington's respect placed him close to the center of American power. The qualities that made the betrayal possible were the rewards of his earlier loyalty. That is why the conspiracy remains one of the most dangerous moments of the American Revolution. The British almost gained West Point without defeating it. Washington almost lost the Hudson without fighting for it. And the Continental Army almost discovered too late that its strongest fortress had already been surrendered on paper. If you believe the revolution was saved as much by intelligence and individual judgment as by battlefield victories, subscribe and tell us in the comments which decision mattered most. The militiamen searching André, Talmadge refusing to trust Arnold's pass, or Washington strengthening West Point before Britain could strike.